Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to answer one of your questions again. So this question is about Mars, and so I grabbed it right away because, as many of you know, I have a series on my channel and we are already 8 episodes deep, or 8 videos deep into this series. It's called Mars Mysteries, and in this series we explore the esoteric meaning of Mars and sort of what Mars means to humanity and what a planetary sphere means to humanity. But we also talk about the occult and the dark occult on the planet Mars, and how the elites are very, very, very interested in the planet Mars and why. How it's kind of something that's very much in plain sight, but extremely mysterious. There's incredible interest in Mars. It's talked about all the time by figures like Elon Musk, for example. But there's not a lot of understanding as to why on the occult side, on the spiritual side, on the esoteric side. So it's always been very strange to me how Mars can be so upfront and in the public and so talked about, and yet not a lot of information is coming from, I think, the spiritual side of things, discussing exactly what it means, and especially on the occult side, because every planetary sphere is an incredibly ceremonial, ritual, occult thing, and so it's always been so fascinating for me to see that not a lot of people go into that side, and I think that's where we should really be focusing, because Mars is only going to become a larger and larger topic in the news and socially. So let's get to your question. This question is from Starlight, Starbright, bring the light onto the earth. What a beautiful name. And you said, what do you think about these new earthquakes and aurora on Mars? Is it getting activated? Is Earth getting deactivated? What is your advice for those of us that want to do nothing? Okay, so I definitely understand the sentiment of not wanting to do anything and of, being overwhelmed. I feel like Trump got elected in 2016, and with his campaign he brought this idea about occultism there. We really saw that through the Q movement. People were suddenly looking for satanic pedophiles everywhere, and people became interested in the occult and how the occult could be running the world, and how people in politics or people in Hollywood could actually have secret occult interests. That didn't really exist before 2016 in a mainstream way. And so suddenly, in the last 4 to 5 years, humanity has almost had this jump shot, this awakening to the potential that there could be people in power that have a very different religious system than we do, a very occult, maybe very ancient occult religious system than we would have, the profane, as many people in secret societies would call us. So that was a really big deal, because before that point, conspiracy theory had not really permeated society. So now it's gone a bit weird, where suddenly everybody is there. It's become a little bit hardcore for sure, but just speaking about the fact that it's now in the mainstream is something very interesting. But as you're saying, Starlight, there is something very intimidating about it, and there is something very exhausting about it, because it's not something that really is rooted in the physical plane, is it? It's really something that is, at least in part, beyond us. and we can't see it, and it's not tangible. We can't taste it, and so we can't interact with this world, the spiritual world, the occult world, and the way that we interact with, our friends or our family and the more mundane concepts that we're used to dealing with. So that is actually very exhausting because we immediately kind of feel like we don't have control. We understand that it's important, and we understand that if we don't really get it, that it could be detrimental for us, but we often don't know where to begin. And so if you're new to my channel, I really recommend starting at my In Plain Sight series from episode 1 all the way to Mars Mysteries, because that's going to explain for you what the occult is, what healthy spirituality is, what unhealthy spirituality is, what symbolism is, and it's going to help you start placing things together into how this works. And it's funny how, once you begin to study this material, how natural it is for you to actually get it. It seems very intimidating, but once you actually start researching it, and once you start to actually work with the concepts, meditate, you'll see how natural it is. Because one of the most important things for you to understand is that all of these occult ideas, these spiritual ideas, are already within us. They're already within you. When you study the occult, when you study spirituality, when you study esoterica, you're not taking it in like you're studying for an exam, where you're cramming your logical 3D mind with all of this information that you have to recall. No. Esoteric study is fundamentally different than intellect. It's a higher octane. It is actually more, esoteric study is actually better described as remembering, and it's better described as activating. Okay, really big difference. So esoteric study is really more like remembering and activating, whereas whatever you're doing in school, that kind of thing, that is more like filling up your 3D mind with a bunch of information to recall. These are very different activities. So let's get into Mars. So recently, there's been a lot of reporting on Mars. We've had articles that Mars is experiencing earthquakes and sort of, I guess, auroras or light anomalies on Mars. Just a couple weeks ago, there was also a doorway that was apparently on Mars, which is sort of a sharp lined rectangular cutout of what looks like a dune or a mountain or stone. We all know that these kind of sharp lines don't normally appear naturally. And so what we'll see with Mars is that a lot of weird articles will sort of appear that suggest that there's life on Mars, or that will suggest that Mars is waking up, that Mars is alive. And this has gone on for decades, actually, where every month or so, or every few weeks, there will be this article that appears that talks about, a microbe that could be on Mars, or, water on Mars, or a skull that's found on Mars, and then it just turns out to be like a rock. And so this has been sort of our relationship with Mars. Is this kind of cat and mouse game of, is there life on Mars or is there not life on Mars? But the thing that always sort of hangs out in our subconscious is life on Mars, life on Mars, life on Mars. That's what hangs out in our mind and our subconscious when we interact with these kind of articles and material. It often doesn't matter at the end of the day what the article says, or whether it's true or whether it's not true. It just matters that now you're thinking about life on Mars. And now the idea of Mars being alive is now part of your subconscious mind. And you may not even remember the details of why you think there's life on Mars. And so this is very, very calculated media promotion And in some ways, kind of propaganda. If you watch my Mars Mystery series, you'll understand why I'm saying that, to get us to think about Mars. So your specific question is Mars being activated? Is that why there's earthquakes and light anomalies and things like that? Is Mars coming alive? And there's probably a couple different ways that we can answer this. But in order to truly understand the idea of a planet coming to life, we have to go a lot deeper than just the material plane. And this is because all life on the material plane, whether it be you in your physical body with your soul, or whether it be a planetary sphere like Mars and its soul, it begins as a cosmic impulse. Even you begin as kind of a cosmic impulse or spiritual impulse, and then it materializes in the physical plane. I'm going to say that again. So, all life on Earth that physicalizes, that develops on Earth, is actually first a spiritual impulse. And then it travels down into the physical plane or materializes into the physical plane. And then we have a life on the physical plane where we are exploring certain things. And then we ascend back out of the physical plane into the spiritual plane. So that is kind of like creation in a nutshell. Creation of a planet or of a human being begins with the materialization of a spiritual concept, the materialization of a soul within a body, and also the materialization of a soul essence of within a planet that then brings the planet to life, okay? So it sort of looks like this. It's sort of like this, where you have a descension into matter from spirit, and then you have an ascension out of matter back into spirit. And this is why when you look at the New Age community, you'll always talk about, manifestation and the secret, and how the way that you are going to manifest what you want in your life is that you're going to make that vision board. You are going to line up your thoughts. You're going to line up your emotions with, what you want, and then it's going to materialize here. Well, that's because when we learn how to manifest in our life, what we're doing is we're creating a certain spiritual impulse with our mind and emotional body. And that spiritual impulse and even thought form will then materialize into the physical plane. Okay? So this is how creation is. Everything from how human beings materialized on the planet, that is creation, and how planets actually begin to materialize all life, begin to materialize the mineral kingdom on them, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and the human kingdom, and beyond. So this is the fundamental structure of life. It is matter is spiritual energy materialized. Okay? I have to point that out, and I have to take the time to point that out because there's a lot of sort of inverted teachings that think that everything kind of begins as matter and then affects the spiritual plane. And that's called spiritual materialism or reductionism. And that's the idea that the earth and the material plane is sort of like the real beginning of everything, and then everything is affected. And in reality, the material plane does affect the higher spiritual planes, but it's not the source of everything. The material plane is more of a consolidation plane where higher concepts and higher ideas, higher patterns in the cosmos are materialized, consolidated to work out super divergent polarities, super divergent ideas that exist, get consolidated into the 3D plane, especially on the Earth. And then the physicality forces a consolidation. Matter forces a consolidation, and an intense consolidation that is not possible in the higher planes. And then once that consolidation happens, whatever is transmuted does go back into the spiritual planes as wisdom and as a transformational energy, but it is part of a system Again, that goes like this. So, how does this apply to Mars and to Mars waking up? Well, Mars is a planet. And every single planet has a soul essence. The soul essence of Earth is often called Gaia, sometimes Terra. And the idea is that there's the physical planet, but that physical planet is just an expression of the soul of the planet. So Earth is sort of like the name of the 3D version of Gaia. And Gaia is sort of the spiritual soul of the Earth, the highest form of the Earth, or kind of like sometimes a perfected version of the Earth. There's lots of different ways to say it. And Gaia interacts with Earth. Gaia, the spirit of the Earth, interacts with the Earth in the same way that Mars's spirit interacts with Mars. And so what happens with a planetary sphere, and this is every planetary sphere, is that they have a certain rhythm of life. And actually, life is all about rhythm. It's true, and rhythm is also a universal law. So life is all about rhythm. And so what ends up happening is that a planet will have a period of life, and it will develop the various kingdoms of life according to that planetary stage of development. So planets also have 7 phases of development. It's 3 phases of a descending development, 1 intense consolidation phase, that's the 4th phase, and then 3 more ascension phases. So 7 in total. And this is every planetary sphere in our solar system. That is our pattern. And so what will happen is that a planet, just like Mars, will come alive for an exact period of time, and it will go through certain patterns that are embodiments of what Mars is. And then it will go into something that's called a cosmic sleep or a cosmic night in the Indian tradition and in the Theosophical tradition, and in the Anthroposophical tradition, this is called a pralaya. A pralaya. And so the pralaya period, or the cosmic night, is when a planet goes to sleep. And everything on it pretty much dies. And of course, if there are maybe higher aspects of that planet that are not dead, but for the planetary sphere in that particular realm that it's manifesting in, it is dead. And it'll be dead for a certain period of time. And this death period allows the planet to rest. It allows it to recuperate. And it allows it to take on all of kind of the karmic information, the karmic events, all the thoughts of the humans on the planet, all of the events, and it begins to integrate them into itself. And it begins to prepare itself for its next life wave. Now, it's not always fun and games how these planetary cycles end, especially in immature planets or planetary spheres that are integrating a lot of different polarities. So a lot of the time, planetary cycles end in catastrophes. On Earth, we understand this often as ending by fire and by flood. And in the mystery traditions, there's this idea that the planet kind of takes turns when it reaches sort of lesser cycles, because we also have to understand that anything about a planet is actually really about recapitulations, and the idea that one pattern is always being reduced to recapitulations that repeat in different forms over time, and that's how we learn lessons. And so at the end of every recapitulation, whether it be a smaller one or a larger one, there is often a disaster. The last disaster that we had is the biblical flood, and the sinking of Atlantis is also in that category as well. The fall of Lemuria, which is associated with fire and volcanic activity. And so this is part of that waking and sleeping system of a planetary sphere. So again, they have periods of life where they're alive. And when they are alive, let's look at Mars. Mars will develop a specific kind of life that is representative of Mars. And it will have a specific human being on it that is representative of Mars. That could look different than a art kind of human being. The Martians are typically larger than Earth humans. But even when we look at Mars, Mars has an intimate connection with the Earth, and the souls within Mars flow through what's called transmigration through to Earth and to other planetary spheres as well. And if this interests you, this is because the cosmos is a solar system. The solar system that we live in is actually a school. And so we can actually look at Mars as a schoolhouse and Venus as a schoolhouse and Earth as a schoolhouse. That's actually how you look at it if you want to really understand it. So we also have connections with Mars, which I think you were sort of getting at when you said, is Earth getting deactivated and Mars is getting activated? So basically, we now know that Mars goes through periods of life and death, and that the death period is called a pralaya. So Mars to Earth has been in a pralaya. It has been in a rest cycle or a death. And that is why it is dead. That's why, for all intents and purposes, it looks dead. Okay? You're not going on there and seeing life. There may be remnants of life because, again, all planets do have human forms at some point or another on them. And so overall, it's not a living world. There's no vegetation. There's no thriving ecosystem there. It's not in the middle of life. It's in a death phase. And so ultimately, Mars will and is beginning, it is beginning very, 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 very slowly to come alive. And Madame Blavatsky said something very interesting about Mars. And she said that during her time, Mars was in obfuscation, and that psychics couldn't really tap into Mars and access a whole lot of information because Mars was sort of in a blackout period where it's not communicating, it's dead, it's in deep sleep, and it's not really emitting any energies. It sort of retreats from the light realm and it goes back. And when a planet is in obfuscation like that, basically the only information that you're going to get from it psychically is your personal connection to Mars, any lives that you remember on it, and just whatever is within your personal lexicon. You're not going to be getting certain information about Mars. Mars is not going to be this big ceremonial tool the way that some other spheres are, because it is in obfuscation. And this happens with lots of different types of cosmic wisdom and stars and things like that, is that we know they exist, but it's kind of like they're in an eclipse to us where they are not speaking to us at this time. And that actually means that other planetary bodies and other forms of light are speaking to us. And we have to integrate the lessons there. And so the cosmos is a series of windows and doors that open and close, periods of life and death. And we don't always have access to everything the way that we would want. Just like with a Stargate system or interplanetary transportation system, Stargate system, not all Stargates are open and available all the time, right? There is a higher pattern of opening and closing of life that is synonymous with how the cosmos developed and how it is developing. So that Mars is now beginning to come out of obfuscation. it is now beginning to communicate. And it's funny because Nikola Tesla, there's a lot of articles that talk about Nikola Tesla being interested in Mars, and there was this whole phase in like at the turn of the century of people listening to Mars and trying to communicate with it. And as soon as Mars would come around close to the Earth, it has kind of a little bit of a elliptical orbit, and it comes very close sometimes, and people try to communicate with it. And that's because deep in a lot of mystery school teachings are the teachings of when these planets are in obfuscation and when they are out of obfuscation. I'm going to say that again. So deep within a lot of the secret societies and mystery schools is information about when these planets come alive and when they die. Okay, so that's something that the public may not have, but that certain people will certainly know about. And this certainly explains a lot about why Elon Musk is suddenly pushing pretty hard to go to Mars. I mean, if we consider that, we last went to the moon in the early 70s, and then for 50, 60 years, we never talked about going to the moon again. Why? We just stopped. And then now all of a sudden, when Mars is beginning to wake up, it's beginning to get those little pulses of life again. Suddenly it's Mars, 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 Mars. And suddenly there's all these billionaires that want to go to space. We've got Bezos, we've got Richard Branson, we've got Musk, all these unelected billionaires that suddenly want to be all over space. We're in uncharted territory, and to be honest, it's very bizarre. But to get back to your question, Mars is getting activated. And there's a lot of people that understand that and that watch. And the only thing is about this that I can say is that Mars, you can't force life on a planet. You can't force a planet to create a life wave and to grow certain species of plants that will be native to it. You can't force it. And this is more what certain societies want to do, is they see Mars awakening and they think that, oh, the life wave is beginning, we'll just get on Mars and we'll start to colonize it. We'll start getting colonization going and we'll be a little bit ahead of the life wave. So then whatever happens there, we'll be able to survive, or we'll be able to essentially, it's not even about survival, it's about being on a planet before the life wave begins so that you can rule that planet and be a god on that planet. Now this is getting into where we're going to take Mars mysteries later on, but I want that to be clear. I want that to be crystal clear. That this is not so much about preserving the light of consciousness. This is not about saving humanity, because trust me, the groups that want to colonize Mars are not looking to save every single person. If a disaster were to happen, they're going to save them and theirs, or they're going to take them and theirs. It's just the reality. Okay, that's my opinion. That's the reality in my world and from what I can see. I don't see these space colonizers as being great humanitarians, especially looking at Elon Musk, who basically is working diligently on completing the most tyrannical act, which is transhumanism, and basically making human beings connect themselves with machines. This is literally the most tyrannical act that can occur. You literally don't have control over your own mind once you're hooked up to a machine. Okay? Having Neuralink, having these things in you that affect your mind, that affect your brain, that affect your will. This is a very big deal, and it's an extremely tyrannical act that will be pitched as the best thing since sliced bread. But I want that to be clear because transhumanism is also very connected to Mars. And what happened on Mars in prior incarnations of the sphere. So there's a lot of people that want to go to Mars and colonize it, but for me, in my opinion, I don't see this as being a great savior for humanity. It's more like use our tax dollars to establish a colony for certain people and to evolve certain narratives, okay? So now, Mars is going to come to life very, 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 very slow. I actually don't think the timing for going to Mars is correct. I think that if humans were to colonize Mars on the schedule that Musk is pushing, I would suggest that by the time the life wave does begin on Mars, they're going to be so degenerated that they're going to wish they never went. Beyond that, if the planet does not have a life wave, so if the planet is not alive and it hasn't exited the pralaya period and in its blossom period, you can't grow anything. You can't really hold life because the physical world is not everything. There's so much that goes into flora and fauna and life that is spiritually oriented. So I don't think that a huge ecosystem is going to be able to be fully developed on Mars because Mars, again, is not emitting a life wave. It's not emitting a frequency that is going to support that. And ultimately, Mars will also want to support its unique form of life, not something that someone's forced on them, right? So that would be my opinion on that. Colonization is so much more than what a lot of people think it is. You have to consider the spiritual element. Okay? So just because Mars is getting activated doesn't mean that Earth is getting deactivated in that sense. Earth is Mars is coming into a denser incarnation for sure. It's coming into, if you adhere to the traditional esoteric teachings around where Mars is, and I think that this is also from Blavatsky or from Theosophy. Apparently, in the Theosophical tradition, they believe that Mars just had its third globe, and so we are on our fourth globe. So we're actually one ahead relative to Mars. And so Mars would then be going into its densest consolidation plane now, its densest globe now, if you adhere to that system. So Earth is not so much being like deactivated as much as it is transcending and moving into a higher form slowly. And Mars is sort of moving into its lowest. And so there's going to be a point where we overlap with it, which is why so many people are interested in it. But Earth is definitely moving into a higher octave. And okay, I should clarify this. There is a pathway of Earth moving into a higher octave. And then there's also a pathway of Earth moving into a lower octave. So usually at the end of a cycle, what you'll have is a bifurcation. Now, in the New Age, this bifurcation is often called like 5D Earth and like 3D Earth. In the Bible, it's called Judgment Day. The Hopi called it the two paths, where you see the two paths splitting, the two earths. This is highly prophesized and talked about. And so what ends up happening is you get this higher arc of life that goes into higher planes and begins that ascension process into the last three spiritual incarnations of the earth. Okay? And then you have this other sphere that is developing now. In the wisdom tradition, it's called the eighth sphere. And I have a lecture on the eighth sphere. You can also find very good information on the eighth sphere in Rudolf Steiner's work. And then the eighth sphere forms as kind of like, honestly, like a hell location or a purgatory or this dark sphere that's made up of everything that's imbalanced. And that is sort of like a lower sphere that forms for a while. And then things get consolidated into that. So, it's not that the earth is being like deactivated, it's that the earth is shifting into a higher and lower version of itself. And this is also why we're seeing society splitting in two. We're seeing people, we're seeing two very different political sides. We're seeing two very different consciousnesses developing on the planet. And this is the bifurcation. And you can also look at it as more of an organic path and a synthetic path. An organic path to life and a synthetic path, or the Christ path and the Antichrist path, whatever language you want to use, it's there. So that's pretty much that. I hope that's crystal clear for you. It was really nice to talk to you guys today about Mars and about how planetary spheres come alive and how they die, about the life wave. I have a lecture, as I've mentioned, that is called The Solar System is a School. And if you want more information on this, I highly recommend checking out that lecture. It is 100% free. All of my lectures like that are free to the public. They often come with handouts and PDFs. And that's going to allow you to actually have a more scientific understanding of spirituality, and it's going to allow you to understand the cosmos as not just this mysterious realm that we're sort of subject to or that we don't know anything about, but rather a realm that we can understand on the same kind of scientific terms that we understand the physical plane. And so that lecture's a very good lecture if you want to know more about that. So, as always, thank you so much for joining me today, and all my love your way, and I will see you in our next talk.